You don't beat England by bullying them and overwhelming them. England sort of beat themselves by not playing with enough ambition. I think England can go to Lyon and they can say, if we can replicate what we did against Ireland, Ireland are better than France. If we replicate that, even in France, we can win. Now, I'm not dismissing the difficulty here because France will want to finish on a high. There's no doubt about that. But I thought that England performance was, by a distance, the second best performance of this tournament behind Ireland's win in Marseille. And I think they'll have a confidence, a stability to selection, and a conviction that from Wales to Scotland to Ireland to France, they will play games where their performance has improved. And if they can improve 1% from the Ireland game, France are going to find it almost impossible to beat them.
Welcome to week 4. The penultimate week of the Six Nations is in the books. It's fair to say it was a weekend of massive surprises, not necessarily predicted by my guest, Stuart Barnes, the great former fly half of Bath. England, the British Lions, writes brilliantly about rugby for the Times, one of the great commentators on the sport of rugby. But sometimes, Stuart Barnes, Homer nods because you made some predictions last week of what was going to happen. I think you predicted wins for Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. And I think not one of them hit.
Stig, let's just say it's Cheltenham Races week, and this is the week to be focused on your tipping for the horses, not the rugby. In my defence, I'll say that I'm paid to write about rugby, not give tips to our readers, which is just as well. It was a great weekend, though, wasn't it? Great weekend of rugby.
Amazing weekend of rugby. And let's go through it because, two of the results at least were a big surprise. Wales beating France was always a bit of a punt, I think, on your part. Let's start with England because we talked an awful lot about Ireland. You have sung the praises of Ireland correctly for a very long time as a great, great team. England beat them, and they beat them well. It was very close, but they were good for their win, I thought, England, in the end. Should we be apologising to Steve Borthwick?
No, because if England were playing anything like this, and England had shown that intention, a lot of us who have been critical of England wouldn't have been critical. I would say this year, when we've chatted on these Tuesdays, a familiar theme has been England are trying to play, but they're not getting there. What they made, they went from Italy and Wales, which was okay-ish, to a real mess against Scotland, but an ambitious mess. And then they made this quantum leap where they were as ambitious, if not more ambitious, than they were against Scotland, but they got their basics right. They were dynamic. They got over the gain line. The quality of distribution was good. And the support play was brilliant. You know, England with Furbank, Faye, Waboso and Freeman had a counter-attack. We have not seen a counter-attack from England for about 4 years. So there's no need for apologies. What there is praise for what was an outstanding performance. And you're quite right. It was a very narrow game, but England were undoubtedly the better team.
Do you think that Borthwick is good at building team spirit? I wonder if we've not given him sufficient credit for that, because as you know, I followed Leicester and what he did for him that year. They won the title. They weren't the best team, I don't think, in England that year, but they won. They won a lot of close games. They then beat Saracens in the final. And it just strikes me that when I saw the quotes, they were quite defensive quotes before the game, but I also felt that there's a camp mentality, isn't there? There's a kind of we're all in it together mentality. I wonder whether that matters. Maybe he's quite a good man manager, Steve Borthwick.
Yeah, and I think Eddie Jones has a great rugby brain, but I think by the end his ego had overwhelmed him, and it was very much the Eddie show. And with Steve Borthwick, whether you agree or not with all his techniques, the tactics of the team, he's very good at pulling them together, and you're absolutely right there. And that was evident against Ireland, but I thought more evident was the actual quality of the performance. Players went out there and they made good decisions based on what was in front of them. And I think that's more than just morale. The morale was there, but this time there was a belief, and they didn't feel afraid to play. And England for years, they've looked as if I make a mistake, I'll get dropped. Steve Borthwick said before the game, talking about Faye Waboso, I've told him to get his hands on the ball and not be afraid to make mistakes. Now, I sort of poo-pooed that because I've heard that from England coaches for so long, and then it doesn't eventuate on the pitch. This time it did. They weren't afraid to play. They did play. They had a structure of counter-attack that was excellent. So Borthwick comes out of this very well, but best of all are the players, and that's because the coaches said to them, right, you go over the whitewash, you're in charge. It hasn't been that way for quite a long time.
And do you think we now know, I mean, what's the most important positions in creative rugby these days? Is it the back 3 and 10? And do we know what the 10 and back 3, the best 10 and back 3 in England now is?
No, but I think we're getting towards an idea of how they want to play. And when you got a lot of players like England, if you know how you want to play, you can get your selection right. I thought, George Ford kicked very poorly off the ground. I got a lot of stick online for saying how well he played. But against Scotland, he got everything wrong as a distributor. He passed beautifully against Ireland, and he ignited people like Ollie Lawrence on the gain line. So Marcus Smith came on, and Smith was very dynamic and very positive as well. So I don't mind which way England go at fly half, as long as the fly half is capable to understand what they needs to be doing, and that seemed to be the case. And likewise, in the back 3, what we saw were kindred spirits and players who understood where to run into space and when to run into space. And, you look at that now and it looks quite bleak for Freddie Stewart because he's a powerful man beneath a high ball. But Furlong's ability to see early where the space is and to pick it, as he did for his try, is exceptional. And it puts pressure on the other team. England play a pressure game with the boot for years, but what they haven't got right is they force other teams to kick the ball back, and then England have had nothing. You've got to have something on the counter if you play that game. New Zealand kick a lot, and they kick to you to force you to kick badly, and then they've got this dazzling array of full-back and wings. Now, I'm not saying after one game against Ireland, England are the All Blacks in the back 3, but 2 of the tries came directly from forcing Ireland to kick the ball away and counter-attacks, and that was most encouraging.
See, to me, Freddie Stewart, I think, I've watched Leicester for 35 years. I would say Freddie Stewart is in the conversation for being in the top 3 best fullbacks for Leicester ever, even at this stage in his career. It seems odd to me that he gets blamed for England being boring when they're boring and they don't win. I mean, is that just unlucky, or is he just doesn't fit in this England team? Maybe that's right. Maybe just some people don't quite fit in an England team.
Well, he's very much, Stig, sort of epitomised England in a way, big and strong and a little bit clumsy. That's the perception. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think there's more to his game than that. But sometimes it's not about is George Furbank a better fullback than Freddie Stewart? Is George Furbank a better fit? And for years, Stewart has been the perfect fit for England because of the way they want to play. Now suddenly the Northampton fullback doesn't look a better player necessarily. He looks a better fit. And that helps you in selection when you know exactly what you want to do.
They've got to back it up against France then, haven't they? Because if they beat Ireland and France, they probably won't win the title. Ireland will probably win the title. But this will be a huge step forward. If they don't beat France, people will say, well, maybe Ireland was a bit of a flash in the pan. It seems really important that they have to, because the French team, they beat Wales, they scored some points, they looked exciting. England, if they're going to beat Ireland, have got to really go and beat France away, haven't they?
I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that. I think what England have got to do is go to Lyon, and first and foremost, they've got to put in a performance similar in terms of ambition and quality. And if they come short because France have been as good in Lyon as they were bad against Ireland in Marseille, as bad as they were in Lille against Italy, if they're as good as they've been bad, then you can go, well, okay, England lost by a point, but they played some great rugby. I certainly, in my column, post-match, if England lose 28-27 and they play some great rugby and they've made one dumb error and it's cost them, you won't see me being critical.
Yeah.
If England win 3-0 and they play no rugby and France are very stagnant, then I'll be saying, so where are we? So I am looking at the performance first, and I do think if England play as well as they did against Ireland, they will beat France.
Did we overpraise Ireland? Ireland have now been in 2 tournaments where they're expected to win the World Cup and they didn't. They're expected to get Grand Slam and they haven't. Is that just the nature of, if you play 6 or 8 games of competitive rugby, it's very, very hard to win all of them at the international level? And there's a reason why no one else has done back-to-back Grand Slams. It's very, very, very difficult. We've not done it for a long time. So have we overpraised Ireland, or is it just the nature of competitive rugby?
Ireland are a fantastic team. They were a fantastic team, even though they lost in the quarterfinal of the World Cup. And they're a fantastic team. Overall, 4 games in, they're clearly the best team in the tournament. You can lose games. We've said this. It comes with a health warning. I didn't see England beating Ireland, but we both said, it's not impossible.
Yeah.
Nothing's impossible in life. And Ireland are a very fine team. They've now lost, I think, 3 of their last 26 games. They've played all the best teams in the world. I don't think there's many people who watch, talk about, or play rugby who wouldn't mind a record like that. I certainly wouldn't have minded it.
Do you think that a back-to-back Grand Slam is almost impossible? It strikes me that, it's nothing is impossible, so it could happen. But,
I was going to say.
Yeah, but it does strike me that the level of difficulty this year has really been revealed, because this is a very, very good Irish team. And in some ways, it's playing in a tournament where most teams have their problems. It's fair to say this year, I think. France haven't been as good as they could have been. Scotland haven't. England we know about. So this was the year to do it. It just shows you how difficult it is.
It is, because there's always going to be somebody who will rise to the occasion. Wales in the past have been very good at putting a spoke in the wheel. They're good at that. England were the team this year, and this wasn't any old English performance. This was the finest English performance I have seen in 5 years. And it was at Twickenham, and there was a crowd that were hungry for success, not just success, hungry for a performance. And when they got them both, that makes it Twickenham, when England are good, is a bloody hard place to play.
Yeah.
And so it was for Ireland, and that's why it's so difficult. I just thought when they beat France in Marseille, if I said I got one thing really badly wrong, I just thought they will blitz it now. And I just didn't see any team putting in that performance. And, credit to England. But England have jumped triple in terms of quality performance. And now they've got to do that against France. And Ireland will go back, and they'll probably be very good against Scotland. So Ireland are still, I think, will be crowned champions, and they're the best team in Europe. But as you say, Stig, it takes one inspired day and you're in trouble.
I mean, let's talk about Italy, because Italy have been, to a lesser or greater extent, a disappointment for decades, it strikes me. I really want Italy to be good. There's a Leicester player who I love called Martin Castrogiovanni, who is a prop. They've had that number 8, that amazing number 8, didn't they, for years and years, Italy. Who do I mean? Do I mean Parise? Was he?
Parise, amazing. Sergio Parise, wonderful player.
And they've had their players, haven't they, once, over time, but they've never done it. Now, so the question is, they've beaten Scotland. They should have beaten France. Is this the tournament that they can build on and actually... You no longer just mark on your book, well, Italy will lose that game? I mean, is this a moment for Italy, do you?
It's semi-miraculous. You think back to the World Cup. I had high hopes for Italy, not to qualify, because they were there with France and New Zealand in the pools. I thought they were really going to perform and were going to shake up one of them. And it all went totally wrong. And they get themselves a new coach, and they've reinvented themselves. It's very important. Treviso are second in the URC, so they've got a core of players who are playing together, and they tried to play some of the most imaginative attacking rugby we've seen for a long time last year, and they did. But they forgot about the other sides of it. Now what we're seeing, there's still that vestige of the attacking game, but it's not all out. It's not sort of off the wall stuff. And they pick some beautiful angles, really good. But the forwards are playing with far more definition and far more commitment. You talked about Steve Borthwick and bringing the team together. Italy feel like they had a New Zealand coach and they were trying to play New Zealand rugby and they succeeded. But Kieran Crowley didn't understand the Latin mentality, and that very much is coming through with an Argentinian coach this year who's coached in France. He understands what you've got to do with Italy, and that's why we're getting the results. But it is a quite amazing turnaround when you think about their World Cup. And you know, Italy, in many ways, they're not going to win the tournament, but crikey, if they were to beat Wales, they would be my team of the tournament.
Yeah, and actually they've got to play away to Wales. But there's an argument in which Italy should be going to play Italy in the Six Nations in Italy should be a thing you worry about. When you look at the fixture list, whatever country you support, you think, oh God, we've got Italy in Rome. That should be a tricky get. That's the level they need to get to, isn't it, Stuart? Where that's a game you worry about because playing Italy in Italy is going to be hard.
Well, they've achieved that this year, haven't they? They lost by 3 points. Okay, England were always beating them, but they kept it tight. They've beaten Scotland. They've drawn with France away. They've only got the one blip, which was that 36-0 against Ireland, who are a magnificent team, and blew them away in the first half. So Italy are really there now. And what's fascinating about this week, they'll go to Cardiff with real belief, because 2 years ago, they won in Cardiff, and Ange Capuozzo, the galvanising force at fullback or wing, was wondrous that day. And I look at Wales and I still see a team that have started the earliest build for the next World Cup. I thought the way they dropped George North and brought in a youngster like Joe Roberts was almost saying, look, none of this matters. And their performances and results are showing a similarity. They look like a team who don't feel that winning is everything. Now, England sometimes have been overly obsessed with winning, and it's held them back. Wales are the other way. They don't have an obsession because they know they're building towards something else. But now, with 4 straight losses in the Six Nations, they can't pretend they're not under massive pressure, because perception always is that Italy at home is the game you win. Wales are now on the verge of a wooden spoon. Italy have got 7 points. You know, Wales are pushing. Wales are going to be struggling to not get the wooden spoon, even if they beat Italy. They're going to need a big performance. But you know, the shadow of an Italian win looms large over Cardiff. Let's put it that way.
And that's interesting because this would be the worst tournament performance since 2003, I think, for Wales. And the problem with rebuilding, Stuart, is that on one hand, it's the right thing to do. In other sports in America, they call it tanking, where you just deliberately lose so you can get good picks and then you build up again and you go. But the danger is you get so used to losing, because you're always climbing the next mountain, not the mountain, the one that you're on. It's really hard to turn that. We're tearing everything down to rebuild it. It just becomes we're tearing everything down and we forget how to rebuild. That's the risk for Wales, isn't it? That I'm sure it's the right thing to do to look ahead to the next World Cup. But if you lose and lose and lose and you lose to Italy and you get whitewashed in the Six Nations, then what happens? Then it takes an awful lot of character to keep the rebuild going, doesn't it?
Well, that's the stage. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's this balance between performing and getting the results. And after a World Cup is the time to start with the performing. And you've got to get the performance better. But there's that moment when the performance has to transition into a win. And Wales, as you say, if they lose to Italy, they're 5 straight defeats. They're going to be looking at their performance and saying, well, how do we win? And it's a long time ago since I played rugby. But when I played in England teams back in the last century, we were used to losing.
Yeah.
And I use that phrase carefully. When you're used to losing, you don't believe you can win. And when you don't believe you can win, it becomes really hard to win, even if you're playing quite well. I play for a club team, Bath, who, no matter what the standard of performance, we always believed, because we built up, we performed, and then we became winners. And because we kept winning, it didn't matter if we played badly, we could get away with it. And that very much is the... If you look at the history of rugby union international level, New Zealand in particular and South Africa stand out. And they stand out because they build winning sequences. And then when it gets to World Cups, South Africa in particular in the World Cup, they don't have to play brilliantly as we can see them play between World Cups, but they know how to win. And people say, oh, it's about 10-man rugby, it's about using the forwards. It's not. It's just doing what you got to do.
Yeah.
And that can be easier. And that's where Wales are. Wales are right now, they're in the foothills, and they keep falling backwards. And at some stage, the World Cup comes, and from Snowdonia to Everest is one hell of a journey, and they ain't going to be able to make it.
No, and they might therefore take a 6-3 win against Italy, because actually just getting on the board is important for next year, for the rebuild.
Vital now. Warren Gatland has got no other line. There's no hiding from this one, and the Welsh fans will see that. They will regard themselves as a greater rugby nation than Italy and expect to win. On form at the moment, Italy are probably shading the favouritism, even though it's at Cardiff. But this is the anyway, anyhow game for Wales. They have to win this one.
We'll get to the predictions in a moment, Stuart. France beating Wales. The Le Garrec pass, the reverse pass. I was trying to think. I couldn't think of a better pass I'd ever seen in a game of. I'm sure there have been. I've seen in many games of rugby, not as many as you, but I've seen many. I don't know if he quite meant it to go exactly to lead the guy around as he was going. People haven't seen it. Do Google it. It's a reverse pass from the right-hand side of the pitch. It goes 40 yards maybe across the pitch to someone who then gets the ball and goes with it. How did you judge that, Stuart?
I love Nolan Le Garrec. You know, I've been saying France have been getting it all wrong by starting with Luku and keeping him on the bench. France weren't playing very well in that first half, and without him, they could have been in a real hole. He was outstanding. And he's an outstanding player with a bit of chutzpah. I never put those things down to luck. Players like that, you just say, hey, he's got the balls to go for it. That's genius, that's skill. And I'm going to be with Nolan Le Garrec on that one every time. You don't know exactly where it'll go, but great scrum halves. It's like Antoine Dupont. He could close his eyes and give you a rough idea when most of his mates are going to be on the pitch.
Yeah.
So roughly, he got a chance of reverse passing it, and it'll go somewhere near. So Le Garrec can say, I knew that if I put it in that area, we'll have someone. And I'm prepared to believe that, because otherwise you're saying, I won't accept genius. You can't do that. You've got to be some other form of, premeditated practice on the training field. To hell with that. Let's just go for a bit of genius.
Yeah, it was absolutely. If people haven't seen it, I watched it like 5 times in a row. I just couldn't believe it. It pulled it off. Okay, prediction time. With the caveat that we're not doing brilliantly when it comes to predictions. It has been quite an up and down tournament, hasn't it? Because Ireland were the red hot favourites to win everything, particularly after beating France. Italy have performed against expectation. We've had a draw. You don't often get that. Scotland have been a really tricky team to pick, because on their day, the first half against Wales, they looked magical and like they were progressing. Now, all of a sudden, you look at Scotland and say, this is a disappointing Six Nations. I would think they could have beaten France, but didn't. Did beat England, lose to Italy. It's a bit of a weird up and down tournament, isn't it?
It's squeezed, isn't it? I mean, you've got England and Ireland with 3 wins, Wales with none, and then you've got the other teams, Scotland 2, France 2, Italy 1.5. Everything is condensed, and it's been much closer than anyone expected, and that's what makes it quite hard, says he, trying to cover for his failings to predict. I mean, who thought that France would get hammered by Ireland so much? And ever since then, it has been really quite difficult. And even in games that you predict correctly, like England, Italy, who thought it would be 3 points in it? Who
Yeah.
thought Italy could draw in Lille with France and should have won? And on that one, I was delighted, by the way, for Paolo Garbisi to get his kicking boots back on and the smile on his face.
Yeah.
I thought he took the moment in Lille when he hit the post brilliantly. And it's a wonderful thing to see a young player show the nerve and the temperament to say, that's history. That was great.
Yeah.
It's been very difficult.
So here we go then. And actually, all three of these aren't easy to pick, actually. I think you could make some sort of case, maybe not for the middle one, but let's go see where we go. Wales, Italy. It is in Wales. It's in Cardiff. Italy, as you said, are the form team comparatively. Wales have lost all their previous games. They have to win. The crowd will be huge, you would imagine. Singing, passionate support for Wales. What you got?
Well, I went for Wales to beat France and they collapsed in the second half. So this time, I'll probably get it wrong again, but I'm going to go for Italy to beat Wales. I think the pressure on Wales to win will be overbearing. And I think Italy will believe they can win, but they won't have that pressure of having to win, if you understand, because they've already had a tournament that has exceeded expectations. So they'll believe it, but they won't be oppressed by the pressure. So I'm going to go for Italy. They're playing good rugby. It's not a fluke. An away win.
Ireland, Scotland. Ireland need a point, don't they, effectively, to win the championship. They can't, in their view, have this beginning of the championship and then let England be champions. So what do you think? Ireland, Scotland, in Ireland.
If you believe Ireland are one of the best teams we've seen this century, which I do, then they will bounce back. They came up against an exceptional English 80 minutes. They did not play badly themselves. Ireland won't go into their shells. They'll come out of this game, and I think they won't. The England defeat will just make them more determined. I expect a convincing Ireland win against a Scotland team who are once again struggling to reach the sum of their parts.
Yeah, and then as you said, Scotland's season's been neither one thing nor another, so it's very
hard.
To
very disappointing. So Ireland well there.
And then the last game. So if Scotland were to beat Ireland, England could be playing for the championship. That feels unlikely, but it's not impossible. It's the night game is France versus England. The French are at home. A disappointing season for the French. A potentially very positive season for England if they win. What's going to happen here, Stuart?
It's very hard to work out France now. They haven't played well this season, and I didn't think they played well for a half, at the very least, against Wales. Everyone's talking about the sheer size and physique of the French pack and the power that they can roll off the bench. But I don't think you don't beat England by bullying them and overwhelming them. England sort of beat themselves by not playing with enough ambition. I think England can go to Lyon and they can say, if we can replicate what we did against Ireland are better than France. If we replicate that, even in France, we can win. Now, I'm not dismissing the difficulty here because France will want to finish on a high. There's no doubt about that. But I thought that England performance was, by a distance, the second best performance of this tournament behind Ireland's win in Marseille. And I think they'll have a confidence, a stability to selection, and a conviction that from Wales to Scotland to Ireland to France, they will play games where their performance has improved. And if they can improve 1% from the Ireland game, France are going to find it almost impossible to beat them. So I am going to go for an England win in Lyon.
So 2 away wins, Italy and England, and then a home win for Ireland. For what it's worth, I'm going to go with England as well. I'll go Wales, Ireland, and England, and I have one point of difference. I think the Welsh support might get them over the line, but we shall see. Stuart, it's been a great tournament. I've loved talking to you about it. So we will gather one more time when it's all in the books. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Stig. Take care.
Make sure you watch the games. Make sure you then go to the Times website or buy a paper and you can read Stuart's thoughts on that, and then come back here next week where we look back on the whole Six Nations. It's been a hell of a Six Nations, a surprising Six Nations. Who knows what the last week will bring. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you like the radio,